So now we're here at the edge of the story most people never hear. The part where illusion fades and the quiet truth comes into focus. You've seen the patterns. You've followed the power. You've watched the strings being pulled. And you've realized the world we live in is not broken. It works exactly as it was designed to. This is not accidental. This is not new. This is engineered. We were born into a system, crafted by others long before we ever had a choice. A system so seamless, so normalized, that questioning it feels like madness, like heresy, like danger, but maybe that's the point. Because when something is powerful enough, it doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to force. It simply becomes reality. It sets the boundaries of what can and cannot be thought. What questions are allowed. What dreams are permitted. What futures are acceptable. And what kind of people the system requires. It doesn't need you to rebel. It just needs you to forget. To grow numb, to feel small, to trade your fire for comfort, to laugh at those who still believe in truth, freedom, and meaning. That's how the world is really run, not with chains, but with stories, with carefully written stories about who you are and what your place should be. You are a consumer, a statistic, a cog in a vast benevolent machine. You are free, but only to choose between options they've already approved. You are powerful, but only as long as you don't disrupt their design. You are heard, as long as your voice fits inside the walls they've built. This is the soft tyranny of the modern world. A velvet cage, a prison with nice lighting and high-speed Wi-Fi, where you can say almost anything, except what really matters, where you can be almost anyone, except truly free. But here's what they never expected, that we would notice, that, even buried under 1,000 layers of distraction, the truth would still call to us. That deep inside the chaos, something ancient would stir, something they've tried for generations to extinguish, the desire to be free, to live without surveillance, to speak without fear, to dream without permission, to build without asking, to be more than useful, to be human, because freedom isn't just a political idea. It's spiritual, it's primal. It's who we are beneath the noise, beneath the scripts, beneath the branding. And when we start to remember that, truly remember, that's when the cracks turn into fractures. That's when the curtain falls. That's when their control begins to fail. But don't misunderstand. They won't give up easily. Systems this entrenched do not fall without resistance. They will invent new crises. More fear, more division, more reasons to say yes to control. They will dress tyranny as compassion, as order, as safety. They will say, this is for your protection. They will say, this is the only way. They will say, you agreed to this. And if you're tired, scared, distracted, you might believe them. But you don't have to. You can choose to see the pattern. You can choose to step back. You can choose to ask the question they fear most. What if everything they've told me is a lie? Not every detail, not every fact, but the story itself. The idea that we are helpless, that we are small, that we must be managed, that only they can decide our future. That lie is the root of it all. And the truth is, we don't need them. Not like they've taught us the world doesn't need to be governed by the same corporations, the same dynasties, the same billionaires playing both sides of every crisis. We don't need endless wars, or bottomless debt, or algorithmic obedience, or manufactured outrage. We need truth. We need sovereignty. We need each other. And that is what they fear, more than anything. Not revolution, not violence, but unity. Human beings across race, class, nation, and language waking up to the simple fact that the enemy is not each other. The enemy is the system that profits from keeping us apart, Because once we stop fighting each other, we can start seeing them. We can start asking questions that matter. Who writes the rules? Who benefits from the fear? Who profits when we obey? Loses when we unite. And once those questions take root, the illusion begins to die. Not with a bang, but with awareness, because awareness spreads like fire. And fire, once lit, is hard to contain. That's why they want to keep us distracted, addicted, sedated, because they know if enough of us wake up, everything changes, and it's already happening. People are turning off the noise. People are asking deeper questions. People are starting to connect the dots. And when you connect enough dots, you see the picture. The world is not what it seems. Power is not where you think it is. And the story you've been told is not the only one. So now the question becomes, what will you do with what you know? Will you forget? Will you scroll away? Will you nod and move on? Or will you begin to see the world for what it truly is? Because once you truly see it, there's no going back. You can't unsee the patterns. You can't unfeel the truth. You can't unknow the chains. And that's when the real story begins. Not the story they wrote for you, but the one you write for yourself. Because the world is changing. The system is cracking. And the age of hidden rulers is coming to an end. But only if we make it so. Only if we stop waiting for someone else to save us. Only if we stop trusting those who've never had our best interests at heart. Only if we rise together, aware and unafraid. Because in the end, the world doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us. It always has, and now. We remember. The greatest trick ever pulled wasn't hiding the truth. It was making people too distracted to care. In a world saturated with content, noise, outrage, and entertainment, the most dangerous thing is silence, the kind of silence where real decisions are made, real systems are designed, and real power is consolidated without anyone noticing. And while most people scroll, binge, and argue over headlines crafted to divide, those who run the world are busy creating the rules that govern your future. They know exactly what they're doing. They understand that the more divided we are, the easier we are to control. The more we're kept busy with emotional chaos, the less we see the structural one. And so they feed it to us nonstop. They craft the talking points. They inject fear, outrage, distraction, and division into every screen. Left versus right. Man versus woman. Race against race. Class versus class. Masks, borders, pronouns, flags, slogans, all designed to make you pick a side and forget the real fight. The fight between the people and power. And they've been doing it for generations. Long before the internet. Long before social media. This is not new. It's just faster now. More efficient. Because when everything is digital, control becomes seamless, invisible, permanent. They've studied history not to learn from it, but to improve their grip. They saw what collapsed empires. They saw what sparked revolutions. And now they design systems where those sparks never ignite. The Roman Empire controlled people with bread and circuses. Today, it's stimulus checks and streaming services. Keep them fed, keep them entertained, keep them arguing, but never let them unify. Unification is what they fear the most. Because the truth is, their power only works when we believe we don't have any. When we forget that we are the billions, and they are the few. That's why every system they build, financial, technological, medical, educational, is designed to breed obedience, compliance, dependency. You're born into debt, trained to obey, rewarded for silence, punished for resistance. Go to school. Learn to follow rules. Learn to memorize. Don't ask why. Don't question the system. Learn how to fit into it. Then work. Pay taxes. Obey laws. Buy things, watch ads. Stay in line. Don't think too deeply. Don't look too closely. Don't stop moving. And if you do stop, if you dare to question, you're labeled a threat, a conspiracy theorist, an extremist, a problem, because problems need to be dealt with. But what if the real problem is the system itself? Look at how they deal with dissent, not by debate, but by deletion. Not by answering questions, but by erasing the questioner. Social credit scores, digital blacklists, demonetization, deplatforming. Character assassination, it's all part of the architecture of silence. Not through violence, but through disappearance. You don't need to kill the dissenter when you can make the world forget they existed. But here's the flaw in their plan. Truth has a strange way of surviving. It doesn't die. It spreads. Quietly, relentlessly. Even when suppressed, it lingers. One mind to another, one conversation to the next. Even in the darkness, it moves, and the cracks are getting wider. People are beginning to see that the institutions they trusted were never built to serve them. That their news is not news, it's narrative. That their leaders don't lead, they manage. That their choices aren't really choices, they're pre-approved illusions of freedom. Ask yourself, when was the last time something truly revolutionary happened within the system? You already know the answer. The system doesn't reward change. It absorbs it, rebrands it, profits from it, until it's safe again, until it no longer threatens the foundation of control. And yet, people are waking up. They see the money trails. They see the patterns, the same names at the top. The same donors funding both sides. It's the same corporations writing the legislation. The same media outlets framing the story. It's the same tech companies deciding what's true. The same elite circle, moving silently behind every curtain. It's not just about power anymore, it's about preservation. They know the world is shifting. Economies are unstable. Trust is eroding. Faith in the system is collapsing. So what do? They double down. New systems, new technologies, new crises. All to ensure they stay on top. All to make sure the next version of control is even harder to escape. The world is being rewired. Physical cash is disappearing. Replaced by digital currencies they can track and freeze. Free speech is being redefined as misinformation, judged by AI trained by biased data. Privacy is being rebranded as a threat. Ownership is being replaced with access. Independence is being labeled as danger. And obedience is being sold as virtue. It's not about your freedom. It's about your submission. They don't want you dead. They want you docile, alive enough to work, consume, obey, but not enough to resist, so they create comfort traps. They make your cage feel cozy. Subscription services, instant delivery, personalized feeds, everything on demand, no friction, no waiting, no struggle, and you trade your freedom for convenience, miling all the way. But there's a cost, and you're already paying it. With your time, your data, your voice, your autonomy, your mind, every search, every click, every swipe, every I agree you don't even read it, all feeds a machine that's learning to control you better than any dictator ever could. And the people building that machine, they're not nameless. They're not invisible. They sit on boards. They fund think tanks. They own patents. They write the policy papers before the crisis even begins. Look at any major event, a war, a pandemic, a financial collapse, and ask, who benefits? Follow the contracts, the lobbying, the emergency measures, the restructuring, the regulations. And you'll find the same hands, over and over again. The same private interests shaping public policy. The same billionaires crafting your reality. The same foundations pretending to be charitable while steering global agendas, and all of it Every layer protected by a media that spins it, a government that enforces it, and a culture that normalizes it. But you don't have to play along. You can step back. You can see the pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice how every crisis follows a script, how fear is weaponized, how solutions are prepackaged, how debate is silenced, how compliance is celebrated, and how resistance is demonized. Because resistance threatens the machine, and the machine cannot tolerate threats, so it adapts, it evolves, it distracts, it manipulates, it doesn't care about truth. It cares about order, not moral order. Not natural order, but manufactured order built to keep you obedient, distracted, compliant. The people who run this world are not evil villains twisting their mustaches in secret rooms. They're far more dangerous than that. They believe they're doing the right thing, that the world is too complex for the masses to manage themselves, that only a select few, the enlightened elite, can be trusted to guide humanity forward. They don't want to hurt you. They want to herd you, to manage you like livestock, efficiently, predictably, forever. That's the world they're building. A world where freedom is a relic, where individuality is risk, where thinking too much is a liability, where everything is optimized, categorized, and sanitized for their benefit. But here's what they didn't plan for: the human spirit. It's messy, unpredictable, defiant. It questions, it dreams, it rebels, it remembers, and no matter how sophisticated the system becomes, no matter how total the surveillance, no matter how perfect the algorithm, you cannot program the soul. You cannot erase instinct. You cannot silence truth, forever and somewhere deep inside. We all know it. We feel the tension, the quiet wrongness in the world, the sense that something is off, that we're being watched, managed, controlled, that life used to feel freer, simpler, more real, and we wonder what changed. The answer is everything, because we weren't paying attention, but we are now, and that changes everything. If you've ever wondered why the same problems keep repeating: wars, inflation, inequality, division, it's because the system wasn't designed to solve them. It was designed to maintain them. Because for those who truly run the world, instability is not a threat, it's an opportunity. Every crisis is a gateway to more control. Every collapse, a ladder to climb even higher. And the pattern is clearer now than ever. After every financial meltdown, the wealth gap grows wider. After every war, new markets open up. After every pandemic, surveillance tightens. What looks like chaos to us is carefully calculated to them. They don't think in election cycles. They think in generations, in decades, in shaping the long arc of history, quietly, invisibly, permanently. But to fully understand how they do it, we have to understand one thing: how power is hidden in plain sight. Start with influence, not the kind that screams on social media, but the kind that whispers behind closed doors. Influence that doesn't come from having 1 million followers, but from having one phone call that changes everything. That's the kind of influence held by a select few at the top of global institutions that most of the world has never voted for, but that affect every part of our lives. Take the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum. These are not conspiracy theories. These are real, powerful entities that guide global policy, direct financial aid, and shape the future of entire continents. And yet, who elected them? Who holds them accountable? Questions. Their motives. They meet in luxury resorts behind glass walls and private security, discussing the fate of nations. They release white papers, make deals, fund projects, and the world obeys. Not because it agrees, but because it has no choice. Debt becomes leverage, aid becomes control, guidelines become laws, And over time, sovereignty becomes fiction. And then there are the central banks. Institutions like the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank. Most people believe these are part of their governments. They're not. They operate independently. They're not subject to democratic vote, and yet they determine interest rates, inflation, employment levels, things that impact every citizen directly. With just a sentence at a press conference, they can crash markets or send them soaring. They can wipe out pensions or inflate housing bubbles. And yet, most people couldn't name the person in charge. These are the people who really run the world, not politicians, not celebrities, not the loud voices on the news, but quiet figures in suits behind glass doors who operate without elections, without scrutiny, without opposition, because the system was built to protect them. And it's not just economics. Think about technology. Who decides what we see online? What is censored? What is promoted? Algorithms shape our reality. They decide what we're angry about, what we fear, what we desire, and who controls the algorithms. A handful of tech corporations, Meta, Google, Amazon, TikTok, X, their platforms reach billions of people daily. Their software listens to us, watches us, studies us, and learns how to manipulate us better each day. We're not users, we're data points. Fuel for an engine we don't control. And the scary part. These companies often work hand in hand with governments. They censor together. They surveil together. They push narratives together. They even influence elections directly or indirectly, all while pretending to be neutral platforms. All while hiding behind terms like safety, guidelines, and community standards. But what community is really setting those standards? What agenda hides behind those guidelines? And who decides what counts as truth? When you look closer, you realize these corporations aren't just private businesses. They're extensions of a larger power network, one that includes intelligence agencies, political donors, international NGOs, and investment funds. Their goal is not just profit, it's control. Over information, over communication, over thought, and while we scroll and swipe. They build the infrastructure of a digital prison, facial recognition, social credit systems, biometric tracking, digital IDs, central bank digital currencies. All of these are being tested, rolled out, normalized. All of them promise convenience, security, progress. But what they really offer is control, total control. The ability to monitor every transaction, block dissent, freeze accounts, enforce compliance not with guns, but with silence. This is not science fiction. This is now in China. The blueprint is already active. In Europe, it's being introduced. In the US, the groundwork is being laid. And in the shadows, the architects of this system are already celebrating. Because once this net is complete, resistance becomes obsolete. They won't need to rule by fear. They'll rule by necessity. You won't be forced to obey, be unable to function. You don't. But here's the most twisted part. They believe they're doing the right thing. They see themselves as saviors, as visionaries, as the wise few who must guide the ignorant masses. They speak in terms like sustainability, equity, and global cooperation. They hold climate conferences and economic forums, preach about justice and unity. But when you look at their actions, you see the truth. Their solutions always lead to more power for them and less freedom for us. They build a world where decisions are made at the top and compliance is demanded at the bottom. A world where the few decide what is best for the many. Not through violence, but through persuasion, dependency, and control. And how do they maintain this illusion? They use culture, media, entertainment, distraction. They feed us a never-ending stream of headlines. Sports, scandals, celebrity drama, political outrage. They divide us by race, gender, class, ideology, anything to keep us fighting each other instead of asking the real questions. Because if the people ever united, if they ever stopped fighting over scraps and looked up at the real structure of power, everything would change. But they don't want change. They want stability. Stability for them. Chaos for us. It's a brilliant system. Ruthless, efficient, almost elegant. The same hands that create the problems also offer the solutions. They crash the economy, then propose a digital currency. They create social division, then offer censorship to keep us safe. They cause inflation, then raise interest rates to fix it. They fund wars, then sell peace talks. It's not about right or left. It's not about capitalism or socialism. It's about control, consolidated, centralized, protected, and those who challenge it. They're silenced, discredited, deplatformed, or worse, because the truth is dangerous. Not to you, but to them. Because if enough people saw behind the curtain, the game would be over, and they know it. So they do everything to keep the curtain in place, to keep you distracted, afraid, angry, confused, because clarity is rebellion. Understanding is resistance, and connection is revolution. But the moment you realize how deep this system goes, a new question emerges. Can it be changed? Is the system too big to fight? Is the power too entrenched? The answer is complicated. Because while they control the systems, they don't control our minds. Not yet. They can influence, manipulate, deceive, but belief is still a choice. Awareness is still. Awareness is still a weapon, and unity is still possible. That's why they fear independent thinkers. That's why they attack free speech. That's why they monitor dissent, because their biggest threat is not violence. It's awakening. It's the moment when enough people stop believing the lies, when enough people stop seeing themselves as powerless, when enough people begin to question the script. The people who really run the world understand psychology. They understand fear. They understand human behavior better than we do. They've studied it, tested it, weaponized it. They know that fear paralyzes, that division weakens, that confusion controls. But they also know something else. They know that truth is contagious, that once one person sees it, they pass it to another, and another, and another, until it spreads, until it can't be stopped. And that's the moment they fear the most. Because if the world wakes up not all at once, but piece by piece, their empire begins to crumble. Not with violence, but with awareness, and awareness leads to action, and action leads to change. That's why the battle is not just for resources, not just for laws, not just for borders. It's a battle for your mind, your beliefs, your understanding of what's real and what isn't. Because if they can control your perception, they don't need to control your actions. You'll do it yourself. You'll obey without self-question. You'll conform without force. You'll defend your own prison. But if you break free from that illusion, even for a moment, you become dangerous. Not because you're violent, but because you can't be lied to anymore. You can't be manipulated. You can't be used. And that's when the system starts to shake. Because power, real power, doesn't come from titles or wealth or institutions. It comes from people, from billions of people who, if united, could change everything. And that's the truth they don't want you to know. That's why they've spent decades building this illusion, because once the illusion breaks, so does their control. It's easy to believe we live in a world ruled by presidents, parliaments, and prime ministers. That behind the polished speeches and televised debates, the people we vote for are the ones truly in charge. That democracy, for all its flaws, gives us a voice in shaping the future. But what if that's just the illusion? What if, behind the curtain of public politics, lies an invisible hand guiding every move, pulling every string, influencing every decision without ever showing its face. Look around you. Every major economic decision, every international conflict, every global crisis seems to follow a pattern. Markets rise and crash on cues we're not privy to. Entire countries go to war over resources most of us will never see. Meanwhile, the ultra-wealthy grow richer no matter which party wins or who the public blames. It's like a game that was rigged long before we ever sat down to play it. This isn't a theory. This isn't fiction. This is a reality most people never dared to question. Because the truth is too uncomfortable, too dangerous, too big. You see, the people who really run the world don't hold press conferences. They don't run for office. They're not interested in fame. They're interested in control. Quiet, subtle, long-term control. Start with money. Not the paper bills in your wallet, but the real financial system. The banks behind the banks. The ones who create the money, lend it to governments, and profit from the interest we all pay back. Most people believe central banks, like the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank, are public institutions working for the good of the nation. But in truth, these entities operate with near-complete independence, often answerable to no one, not even the governments they supposedly serve. They set the interest rates, decide how much money is printed, and dictate the flow of credit in the economy. With a few keystrokes, they can lift nations out of debt or plunge them into crisis. And then there are the private financial giants. Names most of us barely understand. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. These companies manage tens of trillions of dollars. To put that in perspective, that's more than the GDP of most countries combined. They hold controlling stakes in nearly every major corporation: tech, energy, food, pharmaceuticals, defense. If you trace the ownership of the companies you rely on every day, your bank, your internet provider, your grocery store, your phone manufacturer, you'll often find these same financial entities at the top of the pyramid. But who controls them? That's the deeper question. Because companies like BlackRock and Vanguard aren't just massive institutions. They're deeply interconnected. Often, they hold shares in each other. They vote on each other's boards. Their leadership circulates through the same revolving door of government, finance, and think tanks. It becomes nearly impossible to distinguish where one ends and another begins. It's not just about money. It's about influence. Silent, systemic influence. Still think your vote changes everything? Take a step back and look at the media. The news you read, the anchors you trust, the headlines you see trending on social media. Where do they come from? A handful of massive conglomerates own the majority of media outlets across the globe. These corporations dictate the narrative, select which stories are told, and more importantly, which ones aren't. While pretending to compete, they often repeat the same scripts, frame events in similar ways, and subtly reinforce the worldview most beneficial to the elite. Dissenting voices are buried. Independent journalists are demonized or bought out. Controversial topics vanish overnight. It's not a coincidence. It's coordination. Now, think about war. For most of us, war is a tragedy, a human catastrophe. But for others, it's a business. A billion-dollar business. Every bullet fired, every missile launched, every military contract signed feeds an industry that profits off destruction. Weapons manufacturers, private security firms, military contractors, they all thrive when peace dies. And who funds them? Who owns the shares? Often, it's the same financial giants who own everything else. War is not just about ideology. It's about money, influence, resources. Control. History shows us this pattern over and over again. Conflicts are manufactured, enemies are created, and narratives are spun to justify action. Then, Once the dust settles, the same players reap the rewards: contracts to rebuild, licenses to drill, loans to finance the recovery. The winners are always the ones who never stepped onto the battlefield. You start to realize the world doesn't run on governments. It runs on interests, on networks of power so vast and intertwined, they defy simple explanation. This is not a conspiracy, it's a structure, a system, one that has been refined over decades, even centuries, by those who understood early on that true power doesn't lie in public office. It lies in the shadows, in the systems people never think to question. And the scariest part? Most of this isn't even hidden. The data is public. The ownership structures, the board members, the financial filings, it's all there, buried under jargon and layers of bureaucracy. But it's not about secrecy. It's about complexity. Make it just complicated enough that the average person gives up. Distract them with scandals, culture wars, political theater. Keep them busy. Keep them angry. But never let them look up, because if they did, it'd start to ask the real questions. Why do corporations have more power than entire governments? Why do the richest 0.01% keep getting richer no matter who is in power? Why are the same people always behind the scenes at every major crisis? Why do politicians so often serve corporate interests over public ones? And perhaps, most importantly, who benefits? That's the question that cuts through everything. Not who's to blame. Not what happened, but who benefits. Follow that question long enough, and you'll find answers you were never supposed to see. Names that don't appear in headlines. Organizations you've never voted for. Agreements you never consented to. Systems that were built without your knowledge, but control your choices, your freedom, your future. And yet, despite all this, the illusion of choice persists. Every few years, we're offered two sides of the same coin, told that our voices matter, that change is coming. But real change never arrives. Because real power was never up for election. It was inherited. It was purchased. It was protected. And it operates far beyond the reach of ordinary citizens. From the halls of Davos to the boardrooms of Wall Street. From the think tanks of Washington to the vaults of the City of London. Decisions are made that will shape the future of the planet. Not just for the next 5 years, but for the next 50. Economic policies, climate strategies, health regulations, surveillance laws. All mapped out by people who were never elected, never questioned, and never held accountable. It's not about one person. It's not about a secret society in a smoky room. It's about a system. A global architecture of influence where money flows upward, power consolidates, and the majority remain in the dark. And yet, the cracks are beginning to show. More people are asking questions. More are waking up to the patterns. The trust in institutions is eroding. The faith in the system is wearing thin. The illusion is harder to maintain. And those who truly run the world, they know it. So they adapt, they evolve, they rebrand, control. Today doesn't always look like tyranny. It looks like convenience. It looks like safety. It looks like progress. But behind the smart devices, the social media feeds, the digital currencies, and the health passports, lies the same goal. Centralize power and keep it in the hands of tactos. And keep it in the hands of the few. And so, we find ourselves at a crossroads. Do we continue believing the illusion? Or do we start pulling the threads? Because the world you see isn't the world that is. And those who run it aren't who you think. They never were.